Who would have thought that crime could thrive in Venda, a previously quiet province in Limpopo, South Africa? Once a peaceful region, it became home to the ruthless Jerusalem gang, businessmen turned criminals who built an empire of extortion, trafficking, and violence, ruling Limpopo's underworld. No one knows exactly when the Jerusalem gang was born. There are no official records of its formation, no clear founding date, no defining moment when a group of men came together and declared themselves a criminal empire. Instead, there were whispers. Stories passed from one fearful resident to another, warnings exchanged in hushed voices across Limpopo. It started as a rumor, then a shadow, then a force too powerful to ignore. The streets knew the name long before the authorities did. Jerusalem, a name meant to symbolize promise, something almost holy, yet what it came to represent was nothing short of a nightmare. It wasn't a place of salvation, but a kingdom ruled by fear, a lawless domain where money, power, and brutality dictated survival. They didn't need banners or symbols. The name alone sent a chill down the spines of those who heard it. To cross paths with them was a gamble with In the beginning, they were nobodies, jobless youths, men fresh out of prison with nowhere to go, seasoned criminals with nothing left to lose. They came together in the shadows, not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. Poverty had stolen their futures, but crime promised them a different fate, one where they took instead of begged, where fear was their and violence was their language. At first, they were just another gang, one of many lurking in Limpopo's underbelly. But unlike the others, Jerusalem had no patience for small victories. They didn't just want to survive in the world of crime, they wanted to dominate it. And so, they began. It started with small-time robberies, quick hits on spaza shops, petrol stations, and liquor stores. They struck in the night, moving in and out before anyone could react. Speed was their ally, and ruthlessness was their signature. If an owner resisted, they didn't just take the money, they took everything. A burning shop was a lesson to others. Don't fight back. Soon, it wasn't just about money, it was about power. They made examples of those who refused to comply. Homes were set on fire, business owners beaten to the brink of families forced to flee in fear. The authorities tried to intervene, but Jerusalem always seemed one step ahead. Witnesses refused to speak, victims vanished before they could testify, and those who dared to stand against them ended up as corpses dumped in the wild. The gang's presence spread like wildfire. What started as a collection of desperate criminals had evolved into a machine of organized terror. Their crimes became bolder, more calculated, more violent. They weren't just stealing anymore, they were sending a message. This was only the beginning, and Limpopo would never be the same again. Everything changed the night of their first major heist. It wasn't just another robbery, it was a declaration of on the system. The target, a cash-in-transit van heavily secured but carrying millions in hard cash. The location, a deserted stretch of road in Limpopo, far from immediate law enforcement response. The execution, flawless, brutal, and unforgettable. They planned for weeks. Inside information, stolen police radio frequencies, and precision timing. When the moment came, they struck like ghosts in the night. Spiked chains across the road. Boom! Tires burst. The van skidded, metal screaming against asphalt. Before the guards could react, a second explosion ripped through the van's armored plating, sending shockwaves into the quiet night. Bullets followed, fast, relentless, merciless. The guards barely had time to raise their weapons. In less than 4 minutes, the money was gone. The van burned to a smoldering wreck, and the Jerusalem gang disappeared like they were never there. The police arrived too late. The media exploded. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a statement. The Jerusalem gang had arrived, and Limpopo would never be the same again. But money alone wasn't enough. Control was the real prize, and control meant enforcing their own laws, the kind written in terror. Betrayal meant death. There were no warnings, no second chances. If a member snitched, they didn't just disappear, they were erased. No bodies were found, only rumors of unspeakable torture before the final bullet. Fear was power. The gang didn't just kill rivals, they made examples of them. Bodies were left in public spaces as a warning. Some victims simply vanished, their families left with only silence and fear. The streets belonged to them. No other gang dared challenge them. The few who tried, they were wiped out, their territories absorbed into the growing empire of the Jerusalem gang. With their power cemented, Jerusalem expanded into bigger operations. ATM became their specialty. No more wasting time on petty heists. They wanted fast money, big money, unstoppable money. Military-grade explosives turned banks into rubble. with ATMs torn apart in seconds. Security measures tightened, but it didn't matter. The gang adapted faster than the banks could react. Then came hijackings. High-end cars weren't just stolen, they were erased from existence. In less than 24 hours, a car taken from Limpopo would be across the border, rebranded with fake papers, sold in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, or Botswana, leaving no trace of its past life. Then, the final step, assassinations. The Jerusalem gang wasn't just about robbery anymore. They had evolved into hitmen for hire, executioners operating in the shadows, business rivals, politicians, police informants. If someone had the money, Jerusalem had the bullets. Their reputation grew darker with everybody that vanished. By the late 2000s, they were no longer just a gang. They were an empire, built on fear and absolute power. The Jerusalem gang had gone from street-level criminals to an empire of terror. By the 2010s, they weren't just another gang, they were the law. Limpopo's police knew it, business owners knew it, ordinary citizens, they had no choice but to live in fear. It started with whispers in police stations, officers warned to stay out of certain areas, certain cases left unsolved. But soon, it was more than whispers. The first sign of their absolute control was the silence of the police. Officers who once tried to fight them started looking the other way, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative was a shallow grave. Bribes became routine, thick wads of cash exchanged in dark alleys, untraceable bank deposits, threats whispered over the phone. The cops who resisted, they disappeared, one after another. Their bodies are found in sugarcane fields, along dirt roads, or not at all. The message was clear. The Jerusalem gang wasn't to be crossed. For the people of Limpopo, fear became law. The gang didn't just rob businesses, they owned them. A tavern, a butcher shop, even small fruit stands. Everyone paid their share, or they paid in. Refusal meant bombed homes, loved ones vanishing overnight, or a sudden, unexpected. The gang's tax was heavier than anything the government imposed, and the people knew that no one, not the police, not the government, could save them. Then came the bank heists. The gang had already mastered ATM bombings, but this was different. They leveled up. Their first real heist was surgical, military-style precision, inside men feeding them information, explosive charges placed with expert timing. They hit a bank in Polokwane at dawn, leaving with millions before the police even knew what was happening. But that was nothing compared to what followed. One day, Limpopo woke up to a story that made headlines nationwide. A R40 million robbery that changed everything. The gang had gone in with AK-47s, moving like trained commandos. They didn't just rob the bank, they held the town hostage. Roadblocks, cops pinned down under heavy explosions that shattered every window within a 3-block radius. It was chaos, and when it was over, they vanished. No arrests, no leads, just terror ringing in the ears of everyone who had witnessed it. Banks weren't safe, businesses weren't safe, even lords took notice. It had always trickled into Limpopo, but with the Jerusalem gang running things, it became a flood. They weren't just small-time dealers anymore. They had direct lines to cartels moving and through Mozambique and Zimbabwe. They controlled supply routes, distribution networks, and the dealers who pushed their product on the streets. If someone tried to sell without their blessing, they were erased. The gang's operations stretched beyond borders. They smuggled weapons, stole luxury cars, and executed assassinations on demand. Politicians who stood in their way ended up in morgues. Witnesses who spoke out were never seen again. By the mid-2010s, the Jerusalem gang had cemented its rule over Limpopo, and no one dared challenge them. The Jerusalem gang's reign was built on blood, but their deadliest battles weren't against the police. Their real war was with those who dared to challenge their power. The underworld of Limpopo was filled with ruthless criminals, but none could match the brutality, precision, and sheer fearlessness of the Jerusalem gang. They didn't negotiate with rivals, they annihilated them. The first major challenge came from an ambitious crew trying to carve out their own territory in the late 2010s. They thought they could take a cut of the Jerusalem gang's business, ATM bombings, distribution, and car smuggling. It was a fatal mistake. Within weeks, their leaders started vanishing. Some disappeared in the dead of night, never to be seen again. Others weren't so lucky. Bodies turned up in shallow graves, hands tied behind their backs, execution-style to the skull. Some were first, their bodies left in public places as chilling warnings. Then came the full-scale retaliation. Safe houses were burned to the ground. The homes of rival members were raided and looted. Family members of those who opposed the gang either fled or mysteriously disappeared. No one was off limits. The Jerusalem gang wanted complete control, and they would eliminate anyone who stood in their way. But the bloodshed didn't stop with outsiders. As the gang grew richer, paranoia took hold. Greed made old friendships meaningless. Leaders who had once fought side by side began turning on each other, plotting betrayals to secure more power. Trust was a currency that no longer existed. The first internal hit came when one of the gang's founding members was accused of skimming money from their biggest operation. The punishment? Brutal. His body was found mutilated, burned beyond recognition, dumped in a remote field outside Polokwane. The message was clear. Loyalty was the only thing keeping anyone alive. What followed was a chain reaction of betrayals. High-ranking members started disappearing overnight. Some were believed to have fled the country, knowing that staying meant certain death. Others weren't so lucky. Whispers spread that the gang had begun turning on its own, eliminating even those who had been with them since the beginning. For the first time, cracks appeared in the empire. The police, long powerless against the gang's terror, saw an opportunity. They launched a series of raids, hitting the gang hard when it was at its weakest. Some members were arrested, but many more slipped away. Informants within the gang leaked intelligence to law enforcement, hoping to save themselves. But the Jerusalem gang had one final advantage: corruption. Bribery had long been their secret weapon, and it worked again. Some officers took the money and looked the other way. Others who refused to cooperate were found dead in ditches, their police badges left behind as grim warnings. Despite the crackdown, the gang's influence never fully disappeared. Even with key figures either imprisoned or missing, their reach extended far beyond Limpopo. Some say former members still control crime syndicates in the shadows, orchestrating everything from trafficking to political assassinations. To this day, the name Jerusalem Gang is spoken in hushed tones. Some fear it, others respect it, but no one forgets it, because even though their empire may have crumbled, the legend of their terror still lingers in the air, like smoke from a fire that never truly died. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.